Welcome to the Old Code New Tricks podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Haynes, with Adam Taylor. We're the co-founders of Pilot West Studios, where we help non-technical founders navigate technical situations, particularly around software. Today, we have an interesting one. One of the ways that we get business is we're on a specific marketplace where people are looking for our services. And interestingly enough, the topic for today is how do you actually approach a developer? And the best way to do that is to show you a perfect example of what you shouldn't do. I'll just share my screen and give you a little taste of what we're looking at. And for anyone who's listening on audio, we'll try our best to try to describe this. But I'm just going to start by going to the top. This is a 10-page document outlining, this is supposed to be just like general details, what you want, what's your budget. It says it's established for this is for established business, mobile software development. Oh, we'll see about that. Vivid virtual reality, community living. Don't even know what that means, but all right. They have a budget of $5,000 to $10,000, so they got bands, and they're ready to throw them around to get this project off the ground, which is great. They're definitely going to hire someone, which is fantastic. And then I'll just kind of scroll through this, and if you're listening, it's essentially a contract.
It's 9 pages of rambling, incoherent requirements that cannot be translated into anything technical or anything approaching technical requirements. You know, you had just mentioned, Jake, that this was 10 pages, and one of the things that we like to highlight is the difference between
Still scrolling, by the way.
Yeah, still scrolling for those who are listening and who can't see the screen. I just saw the word mango trees. That's never a good sign. Mango trees are included in your technical requirements. There's a difference between technical partners who are going to walk beside you, who are going to help understand what your business is trying to achieve, and what we affectionately call code monkeys, where you toss something at them and they're going to code it up, but they're never going to stop to ask the question of, like, should this be coded? Should we even be doing this? And it's not necessarily we're not calling names. I think actually every software developer has to go through that phase where you just take things at face value and you just build them. And you do that enough times and you waste enough time and enough projects flop. And eventually you go, wait a second, I'm about to dedicate a lot of time and energy into building this thing. I don't want to build something that's going to flop. I don't want to build something. I don't want to take your money and build something that's going to not do anything for you. That's just going to throw your money away. So
It's just like a contractor, like you mentioned kind of in the last episode, how it's kind of like house building. My brother's a contractor, and he's at the point now where he makes, like jointed furniture with no glue, no screws. And he enjoys making the things he wants to make. And if someone wants to make something ridiculous that he doesn't want to make, he's not going to. Why? Because it's also a reflection of his work.
Yeah.
If he makes something that doesn't look good or doesn't sit well. Like he was at my birthday party. We're in this high rise in Nashville and in this like common area, and he's turning over pieces of furniture and like looking about how they're made. Like he's that kind of guy, because he's like trying to figure out, like, what do I like about this chair? What do I not like about this chair? And so there's like all the little things about how you sit in it, how you feel in it. You even asked my opinion of how, like, sitting in one of the chairs. He's like, I'm building something kind of like this. How does it feel? Why? Because he takes a lot of pride in it, and he wants to ensure that like everything is thought through from the way that your arms lay out to how you kind of have to sit back or sit forward, and the comfortability of that. So it's because he takes pride in it, and he understands that if he makes a really quality chair where he thinks through all the details, that's a perfect reflection of what he can do in the future. That's a perfect marketing opportunity, and you're going to get a returning customer. If you're a mature enough software developer in any skill, you recognize that the quality that you make, even if someone's asking for it, is going to be a reflection on your handiwork. And so if they're asking for something out there and that you can't get behind, that's ending up going to be something that's going to be a liability to you and your handiwork, you're not going to do it. And so it's just kind of it's the same across really any industry. And when we meet with other non-technical founders who have these ideas, we just try to be as honest as we can if we think that this idea isn't gonna make it, because we don't want to see you flush money down the toilet, much less string you along to do it as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a certain point at which you're paying your bills, and you don't have to take the very first or the next project that comes across your desk. And that's when you really start caring about quality, and you really start caring about the impact that your work has. And so one of the things that I would say is if you're sending out a project proposal like this, that's 10 pages, you're already specifying that like they're going to record 15-minute videos for like 7 different settings. Like you're already dictating. I mean, this thing even says like, oh, you have to use this technology stack. That's absolutely crazy. That's like you hiring a plumber and saying, oh, by the way, you can't use a crescent wrench. You need to use this specialized tool that you know more about than I do, but I want to dictate that to you for some reason. You know, the more I think about it, the more this might just be completely written by AI.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But then again, parts of it are
That's
so
why it's like
bad
lays
that,
out like a contract.
yeah, there's parts of it though that are so bad that I'm like, AI wouldn't have written it this bad. If it was AI written, I probably would have been able to explain it, and it probably wouldn't have mentioned mango trees.
Could if you put this into Claude, could it reverse search and kind of notate whether or not this has been written by an large language model, LLM?
Let's find out.
And so while he does that, I mean, if you're looking at this, it's just a lot of nonsense in which they're talking about their mission and what the website should look like, the navigation system. So, I mean, let's talk about what they did good, what they did bad. What they did good is they did provide a lot of details of like what they're wanting, in regards to settings. It's just that none of the settings and things make sense at all.
Well, and it's definitely putting the cart before the horse, right? I mean, the 5th line here, what industry, like what are you building? A virtual reality community living. I mean,
yeah,
there are certainly things like that out there, and maybe people pay for them. But if Facebook in all of its power and capital was not able to successfully bring the metaverse about, there's a 0% chance that you're going to do this, especially with your $5,000 to $10,000 budget. $5,000 to $10,000 to build anything is not a lot of money. That's an MVP budget to put out something very rough, very imperfect, that you're going to have to probably 10x your input by the time the project's said and done in order to get something polished that people are actually going to pay for into people's hands.
Yeah.
So that's another thing is somewhere down there it said something about contractor has agreed to blank total for the project. No additional funds shall be asked by the contractor. I like that. That seems to imply that there's no hourly billing here.
Right.
Which we've talked about that in the past, about how hourly billing does not align incentives between the software agency and you as the client. Just very, very strange. It went from 0 to 100 very fast.
Real quick, even, they might say.
Real quick. Yeah.
So I think that, again, what they did, they provided detail, right? They had a budget in mind. Like, those are respectable things, but it's just nothing about this shows that this person at all lives in reality. Just being totally honest. No amount of even me taking this and trying to clean this up in a Word document has made this any more intelligible.
Yeah.
Like, what you see is a bunch of gobbledygook. It's none of it makes any sense. If you read through it, you don't get clarity. You're more confused. And so, like, the top things that stick out to me on, like, what did they do wrong? Okay, well, first, they put a ton of detail in here. They try to make it a fixed cost. I respect that. That's what they did right. But in regards to what they did wrong and what you can learn about putting quotes out there for a software developer is this is too long and too much. There's a level of detail where like this is absolutely too much. We don't need to talk about what the software is going to be in 10 years. We can talk about what it needs to be tomorrow. There's a difference there. This is formatted like a contract. Again, it's completely you're unable to read anything, even though it's broken up into segments. Like website, photos of characters created for settings can be used on homepage, mission page, contact submission form. That's still, while that provides details, none of that makes sense about like what goes where or how do they flow together or anything like that. There's no usability that we can take from that.
And frankly, those are things that your developer should bring back to you. You should be talking about higher level. You should be talking about, here's the experience that I want my players to have while they're playing this game. And then the developer should be coming back to you and be like, okay, I'm imagining there's a home page, there's an about us or a mission page, there's a contact page. That's things that your developer should be bringing to you. They shouldn't be things that you need to spell out. I'll say that as a developer, the number one turnoff, like the biggest thing that immediately made me look at this and say no, is its overprescription. Like trying to tell, like it literally at one point says, here's how long this menu button should appear for. It should be open for 10 seconds or something like that. And it's like, yo, we don't even have a solid business case for this. And you've already thought through how long a modal needs to stay open for somebody to be able to interact with it. This just, it's crazy.
Yeah. And you're also asking for the wrong person. So you're putting a general software inquiry on a marketplace and hoping to get some bites when you already said, I need someone who can do virtual reality.
Yep.
So that's another point to those out there. Like, hey, know who you need to talk to. And again, even if you don't know exactly, because you're not technical yourself, like you should know that, okay, virtual reality software developer is going to be different from just asking a general software developer.
Or a mobile just software developer for that matter.
Right. Because why? Just like with a contractor or a doctor, like they're specialists to all this. And there's a very different reason you go to a general doctor as opposed to a specialist. And if you're asking for something specialty or unique, like it's some kind of Microsoft, you know, it's within Microsoft, like that's not general, that's specialized. If you're talking about VR or game development, those things are specialized. You don't go to just any full stack developer and ask them if they can help, or a buddy that you know who's a full stack developer. Know who you need to ask. That's again a huge, probably the biggest red flag here is like you're just wasting your time. Like no one responded to this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the most egregious part of this is probably clearly showing you don't understand anything about, you know, technology or software, and then suggesting what stack to use.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest turnoff, I think, for any software developer is going to be like, all right, so now you don't know what you want or what you need, and yet now you're going to be a person who tells me what to do. And again, just like my contractor brother, it's just so relatable. I mean, there are people that he works with where he takes on a job and he's doing some kind of remodeling, and then the person's standing over his back the whole time.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, you hired me to do this. Like, get off my back. You don't specialize in drywall or framing or any of that. So like I know what I need to do. Get out of the way. Right. And that's ultimately what this tells you, or tells a developer, and makes them scared and not going to want to work with you, is if you go, well, I know technology and I don't want to get screwed. Hey, I get it. But like having humility to be like, hey man, I don't know much about software. I'm really good at this industry. I'm relying on you to be the expert. Don't come to them with suggestions on like what stack they should use. Like it makes no sense, nor is it appropriate in any way.
And interestingly enough, you actually increase your chances of getting screwed, because any software developer worth their salt is going to look at this and be like, no, I'm not going to do this. Do you know who's going to pick up a software project like this? Somebody who has no business picking up a software project like this. So interestingly enough, by like, you make a really good point there of like, I don't really know what I need, so I'm going to try to cover all my bases. Interestingly, by doing that, you're going to run away. You're going to scare away the very people who could actually help in a professional setting with a project like this, if you were to be less prescriptive and you were to allow them to tell you, like, pull those answers out of them. Those are things that you should ask us, and ask us why we're making that recommendation. So instead of saying, hey, you need to use the MERN stack or the mean stack, come to us and say, hey, I understand that, your technology stack can kind of influence the project a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me what recommendations you would make and why you would make them. Because here's the deal. If we don't know what we're talking about, you're going to be able to sniff it out pretty well. If we're confident about what we're talking about, if we understand some of the nuance, you're going to pick that up while we're talking.
Yeah.
But if we don't know what we're talking about and we're kind of like, that lets you know, okay, these guys can't help me because they don't have the level of technical expertise required. So interestingly enough, backing off the gas, pulling out a lot of these requirements, let them tell you what they recommend and why, is actually a lot more likely to get very put together software agencies who can actually answer these questions and execute these projects for you.
Oh, that's a perfect summation. So yeah, essentially come to conversations. If you're a non-technical founder, which if you're listening to this podcast, I imagine you are, if you are coming to a conversation where you need a project done or you're trying to launch something, come to the conversation, inquiry, or conversation with the software developer with humility, like know what you don't know, and be inquisitive, meaning ask questions about it, right? Because if they are worth their weight in salt, then they should be able to guide you through in a way that makes sense to you why they're choosing the things that they're choosing, and if it's appropriate. Like we talked about in the last episode, if they're talking about really big problems like 10 years from now, like scaling and an MVP, like that's not something you want to worry about. But if they're really talking about like how to make something that's lean, something that's effective for what you're trying to do, like that's really what you want to listen for. And even if it's not your realm of expertise, you'll be able to sniff that out on if they're trying to essentially enterprise this software, meaning are they trying to blow it out into this really big thing when it doesn't need to be that yet.
Yeah.
Those are problems for, 3 years from now, or even if it gets off the ground.
Absolutely. And here's another pro tip. Ask them if you can record your discovery calls. If you can record your discovery calls, you can take the transcript that you have with these software developers and you can pass it to something like ChatGPT and be like, hey, act as a software engineer. Is there anything in this software discovery call that worries you? Is there anything that you would have asked that wasn't asked? Is there anything that strikes you as odd? You can use ChatGPT or Claude as a kind of partner to bounce these questions and ideas off to give you a sense of, do the guys that I'm talking to seem to have it put together? Are they answering the questions? Like you said, Jake, are they trying to make it more enterprise when we're just talking about a scrappy MVP? Of course, it's AI, so it might give you some whack answers from time to time. Take it all with a grain of salt, but you don't have to be flying completely blind, right? And if you have those transcripts, you can go afterwards and you can Google some of the things that they say. Oh, they're talking about how Rails is the one-man framework and it can scale up to tens of thousands of, requests per minute. Like, you can then go Google that stuff and you can see, oh yeah, okay, they clearly knew what they were talking about here. Or vice versa. Hey, I can't find anything that seems to support what these guys were saying. So you don't have to fly blind. But try to pull that information out of them. Don't tell them the way that they should do it.
100%. So when we're looking at this proposal, and we see, okay, what did they do? Well, they try to get a fixed price, even though it's not reality. They're very detailed to a fault. And what they did wrong is it's too long, too much, formatted to where you just can't read it. It's because formatted like a contract. Like you said, it seems like almost something generated partially by AI, which did Claude say anything on if they're able to confirm or not?
It said it was highly probable, but it cited things like grammatical inconsistencies. And I was like, well, if it was generated by an AI, wouldn't it be more grammatically consistent? And it said not necessarily, but I'm not sure that I buy that.
Well, all that to say, it's formatted like a contract. Maybe they pulled something off of ChatGPT and then edited it to what it is now.
That's true.
Yeah, there are a lot of red here that Grammarly's lighting up. And they're asking for the wrong person, so they're not looking for a specialist, even though they're requesting a specialist. Like they even said that at the beginning, and they're suggesting the prescribing how the person should create the thing. Which again, if that's not your expertise, that's not your expertise. It's not your suggestion or prescription to make. So, considering all that we see, that was the few things that were good, Adam, and the lot that was bad. What would you suggest as kind of like the framework for a non-technical founder, as like a handbook to get a project off the ground, to approach developers, and to have a better way of getting out of your brain what you're trying to build in a way that a developer can make sense, but also that you can feel confident in that, okay, this is the right person, and we exchange well, and I know that they can do the job. Essentially, how would you coach this person on, putting out a contract or an inquiry when you need some software help?
I would say start with your problems, talk about your problems. It might be strange to think about this particular project in a problems framework, but it is possible. And I think it helps get you away from things like thinking about UI, thinking about colors and features. These are all things that come after we have scoped down the business case. What are we actually trying to do with this thing as a business? And let's say that, okay, I want to build this thing for myself. Whatever, you're balling, you've got $200,000 to play with, and you just want to build something for yourself, and it's never going to make $1. That's fine. Your business case in this strange situation is just, what do you want from it? What pain are you feeling that is driving you to want to spend your money this way to build this particular project? But thinking about it in terms of problems helps you to be very higher level, a little bit more theoretical. So for example, in here it talks about eradicating depression through virtual reality. And look, I don't even know if that's possible, but if it is, like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about these high level problems of this is what we want this thing to accomplish, right? Because the truth be told, we could build out everything that you've specified in here, and it's probably not going to eradicate loneliness and depression. It's probably just not going to happen. But somebody out there will build this for you, and it will not solve your problem. So why not skip that, state at the outset, I'm trying to cure depression through virtual reality. And, after 10 or 20 people turn you down and say, hey, this isn't feasible, we can't do this, then you can start getting, right? You can, you're getting to the same answer, but you're saving yourself $10,000 and you're getting there quicker. You're saving yourself a lot of heartache.
I like it. So start with the problems and the vision to get this off the ground. Anything else?
Yeah, I think the biggest indictment that I just keep coming back to with this is it's just too specific. Even if it was possible to cure depression and loneliness through virtual reality, there's a 0% chance that anything that has been outlined in this contract is going to make it into the final revision, right? When you're honest about the problems that you're trying to solve, you're honest about the trade-offs that you're willing to accept. That actually just came to mind. I think that's another good thing to talk about. There's a lot of, there's a lot of different ways to solve different problems, and considering what those trade-offs are and being honest with the developers that you're talking to about what the important trade-offs are can really help them make the correct recommendations to you. For example, there's this classic illustration of the triangle, right? You can have your software fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good. You get to pick two of them. So you can have it fast and good. It ain't going to be cheap. You can have it fast and cheap, but it's not going to be good, right? So there's these, you can optimize for two of these points. And, one of the things that you and I optimize for is we don't do fast projects and we don't do cheap projects. We basically double down on good. So if one of the things that you're willing to sacrifice and trade off is good, that's fine. And there are people out there who can help you with those particular trade-offs. But that's going to help us to know, hey, we're probably not the right guys for this project, right? And of course, that's a continuum. It's not like absolute. It's not like you flip $1 and all of a sudden it's cheap versus it was expensive.
Did you mean fast by delivery or fast by the actual software itself?
Yeah. Sorry, fast by delivery. You can have it delivered sooner, but typically, You have to cut corners to go faster, right? That's just the nature. And a lot of times that's a good thing, especially at the outset, especially when you're building an MVP. Make it rough, make it, inconsistent and not beautiful. Just get something out quick is extremely valuable. Yeah, I feel like I'm tangenting a little bit at this point, but I think talking about your problems, talking about your trade-offs, it helps the developers to understand where does this problem lie on this spectrum of the many, many different ways that we could potentially solve for this problem. Where does it lie on these axes?
So when we're talking about kind of the handbook of if you're to build that out for someone to use as a format to go into conversations with software developers as non-technical founders, when we're talking about formatting and this guy being way too long, what is the right amount of detail? And how do you know if it's too short or too long? Because we talked about, okay, here's a few key points to consider, right? Like talk about the problem, talk about what you're trying to do right now. Don't try to bring this out into too far into the future. But like, what's the right amount of detail?
I think it depends a little bit on the problem, right? Because there are times where you're trying to find a developer to do something that's just more technical than you can do, right? So maybe you're a software developer who's primarily front end oriented and you need somebody to do something complex with, video processing pipelines. I think you should speak to your level of technical understanding. Don't try to jump up, don't try to speak their language, right? Because that's another good test is, can they speak your language? That's going to make sure that communication is smoother and is easier and that you get along well with them in that communication. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Communication's hard as we can see right here.
The best experts should be able to quantify what they're saying, really complex ideas, not in your skill set, in easy to understand ways. Like the best professors that we all love and adore and have grown up around, that made it big as celebrities, is because they took really interesting, complex ideas that most other people their level could not break down to layman's terms. And so a really good developer or team or company should be able to, one, understand your problems, and two, be able to articulate what they're doing to make that happen.
Yeah, 100%. So I think to try to be a little bit more concrete, with this, if I was going to rewrite this contract, the level of detail that I would get into is I would say, hey, I have this idea for a game, and here's what I want this game to achieve. I want it to maybe help give people an online place where they can hang out to where they don't feel lonely. And maybe you can even paint some pictures of here's kind of what I'm envisioning. It's going to be similar to, whatever, insert, imagery that you need to. Not 8 pages of imagery, but here's generally what I want it to feel like. But with this project, I would say I need somebody to help me shape this idea. I need somebody to help me figure out, what does this project even look like? Because $5,000 to $10,000 might get you through the initial wireframing of this project. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So having somebody who could say, hey, here's what your roadmap looks like. And that's maybe even a pre-project, $500 to $1,000. You find an agency that can say, okay, based on your requirements, here's what this journey looks like. It looks like a design phase and then an implementation phase, or an iteration between design, implementation. And then you'll have a QA phase, and then you'll have XYZ, right? Somebody who can at least paint the picture for you. And then you can take that picture, that roadmap, and then you can try to go piecemeal out each piece. Or you can look at the whole thing and say, this is a lot bigger and a lot more expensive than I thought. Maybe there's a different way to accomplish this dream.
Yeah. So if you were to rewrite this, or have the non-technical founder through rewriting this, you would start with the overall idea, right? Start with the kind of need or mission, not to the level that he went into, but enough to conceptualize what you're actually trying to accomplish.
Yep.
You'd bring things up like budget and like, what are your expectations? What else? When we think about it, it was too long, wasn't formatted correctly, asking for the wrong person, suggesting a stack to someone that, you shouldn't be doing that to. What else? I mean, what else would you provide? Well, actually, let's break this apart for a second, because I think it's important. It's an important distinction for non-technical founders to understand when you're having a software interview with a software developer or an agency. You need to understand that there's a completely different set of expectations in the first call, what we kind of call our discovery call, and our second call, and maybe third call, and implementation. As we see here, he didn't understand that. The laundry list was too much. He was trying to like, well, if I fit all the details in here, then they'll know exactly what they're getting into. It's like, no, it's completely backwards, right? If you start with the mission and what you're thinking and paint the picture of the idea that you're trying to build, then you kind of paint it from the 10,000 foot view, and then you guys are able to then go deeper and deeper if it makes sense. So I think it's important there, Adam, as you mentioned, like start high level, start with the mission, with the idea, come in with curiosity to understand their thought process. Those are going to be your best things, because you're really just trying to feel out the other person and whether or not it's going to make sense. If their expertise is a good fit, are the personalities a good fit? Is this person reliable in communication? Do they communicate well?
Yep.
That's really what you're going to be looking for in that first call. And then when you get to the second call, Adam, and it's beyond just vision, what I'm wanting to build, and general details. What then? How do you structure as a non-technical founder that second call on expectations?
So I think that something that's very difficult for everybody, but especially non-technical founders, developers have maybe a little bit more intuition around this, but it's very hard to understand the idea of scoping down, of the fact that what you want in 10 years is probably not what you're going to launch within the first year. It may not even be what you have in the second year, but that's okay. If you're solving that core problem in a way that makes sense, a lot of times you're going to build revenue early, and that's what matters. Basecamp, the company that made Basecamp, 37 Signals, they have a document that they talk about, or a methodology actually, called Shape Up. It's a free PDF. You can look it up online. I highly recommend, if you're a non-technical founder, read through it, get an idea of what that Shape Up process looks like, because it is a way for people who are largely non-technical to be able to rough out and shape what a feature or a product should look like, without having to specify these really high-level details that you want to leave to your designers and your developers. You don't actually want to you might think that you want to make these decisions, but you don't understand all the options that are available to you, right? So if I have somebody come in and I want them to renovate some part of my house, I have high-level goals that I want to hit. I want this to be more usable. I want to get rid of this color that I don't like. I don't like this door here. That's great. And those are the problems that they should be solving for. But when it comes to things like, what technique are you going to use to apply this trim? Or, there's a lot of things that you want to leave to the experts to decide within some sort of boundary, right? You don't want to just let them do whatever they want, because maybe they'll use a really expensive tile that you didn't want to use, or maybe they'll use whatever. The same thing here. You want to be able to set these boundaries without trying to dictate to the professionals. Let them use their expertise to guide your project. Tell them where you're willing to make these trade-offs. And I think so in the second call, if it's really the shaping process, it's the process of, okay, so what does it look like if we try to bite off a chunk of this large project, this large feature? What does that look like? Do we start with a little bit of design? Maybe we just start building the code out and then we come back and design it later. It's a project by project thing that you have to figure out. But that's how I would approach that second call.
That's a great point. It reminds me of when I used to get haircuts and I had hair, believe it or not. I previously would go to different barbers and ask them like, hey, I kind of like it this style. I'll trust your judgment. And most of the time I would get frustrated. And I'm not a barber, obviously, but I think it's a great example of someone who, when you're approaching someone else in their expertise, same with the software developer, like you can still show them what good looks like, and articulating what you want, and also some examples of what you like, so that if you have something adjacent, you can prescribe of like, hey, I'm kind of thinking I really like this UI, and here's some reasons why. Then that at least will allow you guys to meet in the middle of, okay, you're talking about, something tangible that you feel and touch that you can express. And then that can be translated into code later on to where, eventually I learned as I was getting my haircut, like, I don't have to give them exact specifications to how to cut my hair. I just need to tell them like, hey man, I really like a bald fade. Ironic enough. I like kind of the pompadour look and do a hard part. But I'll leave it up to you. And at least that was enough of a general direction of set the foundation of the things that I like and that I'm really moving towards, and allow that person to use their expertise to overachieve on the result of all the other details of which I don't need to know about, like, fading and making like a bald fade blend into hair eventually, and how different hair parts and waves, because I had wavy hair. So like, but that's up to him, and I don't need to sit over his shoulder, even though it's my hair, to tell him exactly what to do, right? I just need to show him what good looks like. And I think the same thing for you. If you can at least in the conversation show the idea for what it is and what the ultimate result is, and then show them what good looks like to you, then that's a really good way to meet them halfway in the middle.
Yeah. And I will say not every agency can do this. Not every agency will do this. There are some people that they're like, nope, we use our templates. Our templates look like what they look like. And that's okay. That just means that they're not the agency for you if you're in this situation. I will also call out, not everybody needs everything to be custom, right? If it knocks 10 grand off your budget to have them use their pre-made templates, that's great. You've got delivered code at the end of the day that does what you want it to do. And if you really want to beautify it up later, that's a second project. You take a second pass on it later once you've proven out that it's solving the problems that you wanted it to solve, right? So I do think that the second call is whenever you start getting into there are no one-size-fits-all agencies. We try to be a little bit more one-size-fits-all because we try to kind of adapt. But there are certain things that, like, if a client came to us and they said, no, we're definitely doing this thing this way, we might say, hey, you know what, like, it's just not a good fit for us, and we can help you find somebody that would be a better fit for you, but like, we just don't want to take on this particular project. Yeah. But that's great. That's better than us taking it on, you making some sort of technical call and us saying, well, I guess we can do it, and then we're not the guys, right? Because we don't normally work in that domain. So I think that's still a win, even if you rule somebody out through that discovery process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so we've gone through the high level, what I want, what does good look like. You're trying to suss out whether or not the person's a good fit, if they understand what you're talking about, if they understand what they're talking about. As the relationship continues on, you go from second to third call. What are some other things to know as a non-technical person as things become more technical and road mapped out?
I think one of the trends that we have seen specifically with some of the business owners that we've worked with is that they had a gut feeling. They had a gut feeling that the project was on track, that it wasn't on track. And both of them, if I'm remembering correctly, they never regretted listening to their gut. So if it's the third or fourth call and you're like, man, they're saying stuff, it looks like there's progress, but I really just have like a pit in my stomach that I feel like we haven't addressed X, bring it up. And don't ignore if you feel like something's being overlooked, if you feel like they're not understanding something. And I'm not saying it's intentional, right? We'll assume positive intent here, but positive intent doesn't matter if they still miss something that's critical to your project. So I would say follow your gut. You're not technical. You might not be able to, double check their work per se from a technical perspective. But if they say that there's been progress and they've built out 3 pages and they say they've built it out, and when you ask to see them, they can't show them to you, and your gut goes, that's strange. Listen to your gut. Don't wait until you've gotten 8 months in and you've paid them every single month. And then at the end of 8 months, they're like, oh, well, no, that is a non-starter. listen to your gut. A good agency should listen very closely. They should hear your problems. They should hear your concerns, and they should work overtime to communicate and to meet those concerns. So that's one of my full stop. Like if I have a contractor, anybody that I'm working with, if I just have this gut feeling that they're not listening, I address it immediately. And if they can't fix that and make me feel like I'm being heard, you're out. And I'm going to find somebody else who can communicate.
Yeah. I think another question that I just thought of that would be helpful within that vein would be not only talk about the mission, what does good look like, what are you trying to accomplish, but I think non-technical founders also need to challenge themselves to have this question articulated before going into the conversation, but definitely need to articulate to the software developer is, what does minimum success look like? Because again, with this guy who had the 10-pager, he doesn't know what minimum success looks like. It's clear that he's thinking 5-10 years from now, and he's not thinking about, again, what tomorrow does this need to be? Because that's the trade-off that you mentioned, right? Is like you get this road mapped out and you go, wow, this is like, with what this guy put out there, I mean, I imagine this thing's $500,000 at least.
Done right? Yeah. Now somebody will take your $10,000 and they'll leave you with a sign-up page.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be you. You don't have to be that guy.
To not get screwed, you just need to know, what does minimum look like? Whether it be you're launching a new product, what does minimum viable look like? Meaning like, how can I launch something enough that's like, small enough, built, minimum enough built to make this revenue generating and to prove that people will pay for this? And if you're solving a problem instead through software in your business, you need to know, what does the minimum success metric look like? Mm-hmm. What is the one thing that I'm looking to solve for right now? It's not about what I want it to be or what it could be in 5 years or how I could sell this out to people just like me. If it's successful, it's like, what is the one thing that will make what you paid for, whether it be $1,000, $10,000, or $100,000, will make that ROI positive for you? You should have that articulated from the beginning to your developer.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes success is we get this thing up in 3 months. No users, but we get it up and it's running. Maybe that's success. Maybe success is it has to have paying users within 6 months or else we kill the project. But yeah, being able to articulate that is huge for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'll provide a little challenge that we're going to post this on YouTube as well. You might be watching on Spotify or listening to it through Apple, but we'll have this on our YouTube, Old Code, New Tricks. And if you want us to create a free PDF to guide you through these conversations, we'll make it. Just comment it on this episode in the comment section below that you want something like that, and we'll put it in the description and make it for you. But we're not going to launch it to Cricut similarly. Think about what do we got to do to get off the ground. Hey, but if you're subscribed and this would add value and you're listening, you're like, dude, I want this, let us know in the comment section below and we'll make it happen. Anything else, Adam, that you want to add here?
I'll up the ante. I'll say through the end of this year, it is currently December 13th, 2024, Friday the 13th. Happy Friday 13th, everyone. Oof. I'll say through the end of this year, through the end of 2024, if you listen to this and you say, that's me. I've been needing somebody to help walk me through this technical discovery. No hard sales. We will help you walk through what does that conversation look like so you can take it to another developer. Not even pitching ourselves. We will help you craft what does a good project proposal look like that I can send to a developer and have them evaluate. And yeah, so up the ante through the end of this year.
And how do they do it?
I don't know. Comment, email, call my cell phone.
Doxing us.
There's a few different ways that you can contact us through the website. Any comments on the YouTube channel we'll see, or email Adam at Pilot West Studios or Jake.Haynes at Pilot West Studios.
Oh man, you gotta put my email out there. This is your ante, all right?
Got him.
Yeah, you can email us if you need help in this area, and we'll happily guide you through it. If you just want the guide, you want that PDF to maybe use for future reference, let us know in the comments section below. But this has been Old Code, New Tricks, helping you navigate these conversations, these technical conversations with software people when you're not a software person. Let us know in the comment section below what you like, what you don't like, or what you want to see in the future. My name is Jacob Haynes, and with me, Adam Taylor. Have a good weekend, everyone.
See y'all.